Welcome to the show. My guest today is Amy Button, the Vice President of Aerospace Defense and Government Systems Integrators at Salesforce. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, let me set a little context for our discussion. Federal and contractor employees have been at the center of the coronavirus pandemic, first in facing the uncertainty of what working remotely looked like, and then under intense pressure to meet citizen needs. But as agencies and contractors settled into the remote working routine and now are starting to slowly head back into the office, a lot of the lessons learned around collaboration, process improvements, and the value of technology will remain front and center for the long term. The Office of Management and Budget offered a framework for agencies to consider as they reopen offices. The framework marries the national guidelines the White House released in April, which charged individual states with meeting certain quote-unquote gating criteria before reopening the local economy in phases. Contractors have less direction because much of their decisions depends on state and local criteria. At the same time, companies also are facing a shortage of workers, particularly in technology, data, and cyber fields. The hardest jobs to hire consistently are security analysts, data research scientists, and database administrators. Companies can take steps, however, to ease the burden of employees across the board, and I think our guest is going to tell us how they're going to do that. Amy Button is the Vice President of Aerospace Defense and Government Systems Integrators at Salesforce. So it's obviously an interesting time. We talk about this all the time, the quote-unquote new normal. I think we're all probably tired of that, but we'll continue to talk about it like it is. We have to worry about coming back to offices. We continue to be safe. And then there's also this idea of, okay, how do you meet mission? And there's this global economic pandemic impact going all around. So give me a sense of what you're hearing from different people in the community about how these businesses really have reassessed their digital investments to both maintain current productivity, but also grow.
A lot to unpack there, and there's a lot that companies are trying to manage right now, as you said, in this new normal. So right now, all technology investments are being evaluated, but what we find coming through is this imperative for businesses to digitally transform, now more than ever. The aerospace industry has been at the forefront of adopting new and advanced manufacturing technologies for a while now. However, now is the time for A&D companies to leverage digital technologies more than ever to enhance productivity and efficiency, which is going to help the industry recover from the crisis and grow at those previously forecasted rates. For companies that are moving more digital, any business disruptions are going to be reduced, especially as this new normal presents us with a lot of unknowns. So if the company is more digital and they have some of those systems in place, they're using those advanced technologies, and that helps and enable their employees, partners, and customers to pivot very quickly.
I think we've seen that time and again with both in the federal sector, but also just more broadly in the commercial sector, that the companies or agencies that were more digital, they've had less disruptions. And do you think the reason why was what? Just because they've moved to the cloud, because they've jumped on into the collaboration tools earlier?
I believe those companies, and having invested in those platforms, which allow employees to work on site, which allow them to work remote. It allowed them, going back to that word pivot, much more quickly, because it doesn't really matter for a lot of roles where you work. Obviously it does for some contracts where some of our customers, the government SIs, have to be on site, but those cloud investments in their infrastructure and those collaboration tools have allowed them to rethink the way that they work together.
What I found in talking to federal CIOs and contractors over the last few months is there was not this all of a sudden aha moment of like, oh, we should move to the cloud. They were already there, but it seemed to this sense of urgency from the pandemic really kind of motivated them to move even faster. Are you seeing very similar in the industry world where they said we were mostly in the cloud, but now we're all in the cloud, or we had some collaboration tools and now we're much more broadly used across the company?
I think the wider adoption of those collaboration tools has been something that has changed. I think for all of us, including us doing this interview, we're doing a lot more on video than we ever have before. So if we use that as an example, and I think everybody can relate to that, adopting the amount of even video collaboration tools and being on video. I was talking to one CIO and she was mentioning that now across many different time zones, they can have everybody on the same conference and sharing ideas real time. Whereas before, when people were in the office versus some people being remote, it was a very different experience. And now with everybody being remote and everybody being able to be, for example, on video, they're getting to know each other in ways that they never did before or could have even imagined. So I think there are some things that people are learning that are positive through this. And I think adaptability is one of those things that is now something that they didn't think was possible before.
I absolutely love the idea of the silver lining. I mean, I think we always focus on the negative, and I have to admit, I'm the biggest guilty person who says a silver lining of the pandemic is, and then you write a story about kind of.
Just ask me. I help to find some way to find a benefit or something that we learn, because that's what we're doing at the end of the day. We're learning from this and we're adapting and growing.
And I think you have to be successful. If you don't adapt, and then we see it with restaurants, you see it with any business. If they don't, they do end up dying off. And I think one of the pieces to the adaptation is the people side. You have to adapt how you recruit people, how you bring in the right people, how do you retain people. Are you starting to see some changes there as well as companies kind of rethink this approach?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to a bit of what we were talking about around having some of those tools and those platforms in place to be able to do that. And when I think of hiring, when I think of the application process, when I think of attracting talent and even reskilling talent, three words come to mind: make it easy. If it's easy, everybody can spend their time on different tasks that are allow for higher productivity tasks. But when we think about talent and maintaining talent, if you make it easy to apply, if you make it easy to onboard and easy to learn, that's also going to want to keep people at your company and coming back.
One of the things that we've seen during the pandemic is this move to remote onboarding, remote hiring. Like all of a sudden, instead of getting someone in the room with you and sitting down, it's all done remotely. Is that's also been that part of adaptability that we've talked about? What are you kind of seeing from in the SI community or the aerospace and defense communities about how they're dealing with it? Because again, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's certain jobs that are just harder to find, and it's not just the cyber and the IT, but I'm sure the defense world also finds finding the right skill sets is not always easy.
Finding the right skill set is certainly not easy, and there's very niche skill sets. I think it's going back to that idea of hire to retire. A lot of companies have that as their mantra. You have over 60% of the workforce that's going to be retiring over the next couple of years. So now more than ever, it is imperative that companies rethink the way that they bring on talent. And what we are finding are companies that have adopted technologies which make it easy for people to apply, as I was mentioning before, to be able to find even that diverse workforce, find the people that may not even thought about the company. A lot of times people think about a tech company as being a company you want to go to. Well, guess what? The government SI community, as well as the A&D community, are doing some really forward thinking and innovative things. And for companies to get that message out there, that's going to make that talent, those hard to find people, that's going to make them want to come to these companies. So they're using technology to make that experience leading edge. Whether it's you apply, and then you have 5 different job roles that you can also apply for at the same time. You know, and think about this for companies who have adopted a platform that allows them to have that same prospective employee apply through the interview process and then onboard, all with a seamless experience. They're going to tell more people about that. And they're going to say, look at this company and look how they're doing this. And that's something, given the unique environment right now, that is more important than ever to be able to find that platform that allows a new employee to say, that was the best onboarding experience I've ever had.
It's interesting you talk about this idea of the platform and what is it. And you said a lot of the aerospace defense type companies are doing some very innovative things. Is there anything that comes to mind, or is there an example you'd be willing to discuss that you guys are working with?
Mm-hmm. So there's one firm that we're working with that has adopted, thinking about customer experience. I'll take a step back for a minute, because customers are rethinking from end to end how to have an amazing employee experience, and that it requires some digital investments. And they've used the Salesforce platform to be able to allow for that type of experience. This company, I'll not naming names, but it's a government SI company that we're working with is using our platform. And what it's allowed them to do, because they're trying to find these candidates that are very difficult to find, they were able to use a number of our different types of tools to find the talent, be able to market their company so that they're attracting the talent, and then give that person a seamless experience from end to end. And then the feedback we have, it's really quite spectacular that that company now has even more people, and they're having less of a hiring issue than they did before, because candidates feel like this company knows me, and it makes it quite easy. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning, make it easy. And if you can make it easy for both sides, for the candidates and also the employers, everyone benefits.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing, the feds get a really bad rap of hiring, and there's a reason for it, because the experience is a tough one. And there's a lot of efforts to make it better, but it just seems to be kind of stuck in the mud so often. So what can technology do to maybe get the feds or whomever out of that mud, out of that pit of kind of spinning wheels of, or can we get the right person? Is it the right person? How do we know the right person? And onboarding, the data piece, I imagine, and analytics is just going to be the key here.
Data is huge. So data is a challenge, I think, everywhere, because companies are finding that data is everywhere, whether it's on spreadsheets, it's on documents, it's saved locally on desktops, and it's not on one platform. You're going to hear me say this word a lot, on one platform. And data can be everywhere, but it really should not be managed everywhere. And that's some of the challenges that we're finding. So the power of a consolidated platform, whether it's to make internal decisions, or if we're going back to, because you're talking about hiring, it's to have that single source for everyone to be able to access that. So it's that 360-degree view of either your customer, or it's a candidate that you're trying to hire. But it's that single source for everyone to be able to access that same information real time. And that is a critical piece with data, because right now, as I mentioned before, data's on people's, on people's homes, that people are in random spreadsheets, but it is something that needs to be managed far more effectively. And we have the ability to be able to provide tools that allow companies to do that.
It's interesting. I always go back to the time, I think it was like 2005, when someone mentioned in some conference, it's all about the data. And that just kind of was like the aha moment. And ever since then, everything is about, no, stop talking about the technology. It's about the data. What data do you have? How do you use it? Where it lives? So I think your point about the 360-degree view of whatever you're trying to understand is so important. And sometimes we lose sight of that for the platform or the technology or the whatever.
Because I think people, right? People are what's most important at the end of the day. And when people have an amazing experience, whether it's you having an amazing experience with something online that you're interacting with, something you're buying online, or whether it is a customer. Think about someone that's a client, like a federal client, for some of our A&D and the government SI folks that they're working with. When you have an amazing experience, you're going to want to go again and work with that same company. You're going to want to work with those people again, because you're going to say, that was easy. that made it easy to interact. And it also, when you feel it on both sides, we call that the customer transformation frame. We call it a customer transformation framework. It goes, and going back to productivity, when it makes it easier for the employee, they can then focus on higher impact activities because they're not, when you get out of spreadsheets, right? Get out of spreadsheets, use the data. When the data can be analyzed, when you're able to look at a dashboard, it makes it far easier to interact and focus on what's important is the customer. And then for the customer, it's the same thing. When the customer feels like they're having a great experience, guess what? They're going to want to work with you again because it wasn't too difficult. Pulling teeth. That's the word I was looking for.
Definitely don't want to pull teeth. Amy, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network.